Imhotep, a game by Cosmos, a 2 to 4 player game about building monuments in ancient Egypt. Definitely a Euro game. If you just look at the picture of gameplay, it's a little fictionalized, but it gives you a sense. It is about placing cubes, so as you can imagine, you have a limited number of actions and you will need to collect resources and place them in specific placements with a certain concern about timing, because certain moments, certain windows of opportunity will allow you to score more points than others. It's fairly abstract in nature, and yet it still has a surprising thematic elements as the cubes go together to actually form shapes that resemble the monuments. You build pyramids and you do create a pyramid. You build obelisks, which are piles of cubes. So you create a burial chamber, and so you create configurations that will decorate the floor. There is a strange and very pleasant thematic elements that emerges from otherwise fairly abstract and definitely very elegant and very simple mechanics. Imhotep is a game that has received a lot of attention lately, since it has been nominated as one of the finalists for the Game of the Year award, which is, to be honest, the reason why I became interested in the game in the first place. I wanted to try it. I wanted to get a sense for myself of how does a finalist game work? Is it as good as it seems to be, as people say? Most likely I thought it would be good, so I took that as an indication of a game that I would have high chances of enjoying. So I played Imhotep, and in this video I'm gonna tell about how the game plays and what I personally think about the game. Each player in the game has a supply of wooden cubes, a quarry. There are 4 possible colors, 1 per player. Each player also has a sled of the corresponding color, and that is used to store the cubes of the player. As you can see from the slots on the sled, you can never have more than 5 cubes at a time on your sled, that is, in your personal supply. The game is governed by these 3 decks of cards, divided by 1 of them in each game. There is a deck for 4 players, 3 players, and 2 players. You take the deck corresponding to the number of players that you have. These decks have 7 cards each. You shuffle them, you remove 1 without looking, and the 6 remaining cards will also act as the timer. Each turn you flip 1 face up, and when the last one is placed face up, you know that you're playing the last turn of the game. The card will indicate which of the ships available in the game will participate to the action this turn, which will be available this turn. For example, if this is the card that we have right now, we're gonna have a ship with 4 slots, 2 with 2, and 1 with 1. And different cards will have different combinations of such ships. So this would be how we set up the board for the table for the present turn. Yes, you also have these areas here, which are the areas where you will place your cubes, and you will use these areas to score. We'll look at them more up close later. What happens during your turn? Well, you can do one of several things. You can add 3 cubes from the quarry, from the general supply, to your sled, or I should say up to 3 cubes, because you cannot exceed 5. So if you have 3, you would only add 2 with that action. So an action is add up to 3 cubes to your sled, or add a cube from your personal area to a slot available on one of the boats, on one of the ships. It doesn't have to be the first one, and that's it. Then maybe next player will do this, and then I'll do this, and another player will do this, and so on, and so forth. Another thing that a player can do is to sail a ship. That is, to move a ship from this generic area where ships are available to be loaded to one of these other areas that you see here on the right. You do not necessarily have to have a cube of your color on a ship to take the action that that sails that ship, that makes it leave, and therefore also to take the action that decides the destination. All that is needed is that the ship at least has a number of cubes that is equal to or higher than the number there. So a 2-slot ship at least needs 1. You cannot ship it empty to create gamey effects, but you definitely can move a ship that you do not have direct vested interest on because there are no cubes of yours there, simply to send it somewhere that you know will not be very profitable for the opponent. So the opponent has set up a situation between here and here that will be very profitable, and you completely ruin that by sending the ship where they don't want it to be. Also, during the game, you may acquire blue cards of this type. The blue cards can be used as actions. Then you simply play the card that you have in your personal supply, and you resolve the action described on the card. So this is the general idea. Players will move ships here, and then once they get there, they will transfer cubes from the ships to the to these mini boards here. Each board counts as a separate area. Now let's have a closer look so we see what the boards do and therefore what the cubes do when you interact with those boards. The board up there is the market, so there will be 4 cards there, and players that get there, starting in order from the first cubes to the last, they get to select a card that is there. So for example, as I'm white player, then I use that to grab this statue. The statue can be used for scoring at the end of the game, and the number of points that it is worth depends on the number of statues that I have. Oh, I have another white cube here, so I decide actually to load up on statues, and then blue player decides to take this card. Brown player takes the blue card. How about this other area here? Suppose that's this ship is going there. This is where we build the pyramids. Hooray! And we put it there, just in case. So there is a board there, a mini board there, a grid where you place your cube. Again, starting for the first cube, you build a pyramid. You start from here and you proceed vertically because, you know, Egyptian writing goes down. I guess that's the idea. Vertically, and then you start from the next column. And then once you have 9 here, you start the second level, which you proceed building in the same way, and then you may have the third level. The numbers that you see there is simply the number of victory points that placing a stone on that number is worth. And you assess the points immediately when you place the stone. So that means that when the situation is such, and I'm moving my stone here, I immediately score 2 points as brown player. Then gray player places their next stone here and they score a point. And so then when you have multiple levels, you use that reference there to get a sense of how many points you get. So, well, not to get a sense, to know exactly how many points you get. So if this is the situation and I'm adding a stone to the second level, I score 2 points. Next player will score 3 points, and so on and so forth. Third level is worth 4 points. Additional stones placed in this area, you place them in this area of the board, and they're only worth 1 point each. The temple you build like a wall in this area here, and you assess it at the end of every round. And pretty much you look it from above, or you simply think of it as the stones that are in the top row. So in this case, well, actually we have 3 players, so we also use that area there. With 2 players, we don't use the last square. In this case, when you score it at the end of a round, you earn a point for each stone that's visible from up above, so that the gods are looking at and they are pleased with. In this case, gray scores 2 points, white scores 1 point, and brown scores 1 point. The burial chamber is my favorite one because there's a spatial and even a static element to it, and I very like these 2 elements very much. Again, you place stones starting from here and building column after column from left to right. And how well you did in the burial chamber is determined once only in the game at the end of the game. And how you score that? You score it based on the areas that you have formed with adjacent cubes. Suppose this is the situation at the end of the game, then white to score 3 points, because white has an area made of two white cubes. Gray would score 3 points for that area and 1 point for that area. Brown has an area of 3 adjacent cubes, and then brown scores 6 points. So there is that spatial element of timing as you are loading things. Remember, the things that go here need to be loaded here. So as you're loading things, you'll imagine where they will go when they get there. And then you really hope once you have set up a nice situation that nobody ships a ship somewhere else, nobody sends the ship somewhere else, or nobody uses other game effects. For example, you may have cards that allow you to add immediately, boom, something there, and so maybe that completely sends out of balance a nice plan that an opponent had prepared to place their stones in a certain order. The obelisks, also you assess those only once per game at the end of the game, and simply when you place cubes here, you simply form a column of your own color, and the player with the highest column, with the highest obelisk, scores the most, and then the other players in order. It is simply a matter of measuring obelisks and see who has the tallest obelisk. Now, all of these boards are double-sided, and you can choose to use either side. The side that I showed you is the side that is recommended for your first couple of games as you learn the rules. Later you can choose to use all of the B sides or mix and match any B and A side. The obelisks and this other version work differently. The first 2 cubes from your obelisk you put there and they don't do anything. The third cube that goes there forms a smaller obelisk and it goes there, and you place your smaller 3-cube obelisk in the first, the leftmost available space on this track, and you score the corresponding number of points, which is pretty neat. In that case, my obelisk would be worth 10 points. The burial chamber on the other side works in a different way. You still build it in the same way, top to bottom, left to right, but then the points are scored at the end of the game again, but they are scored based on majority in each row. You simply look at the majority, you assess each row independently, and there's the number of points that first player gets, second, third, and fourth. I really like the B-sides in general. This is the one B-side that I find much less interesting than this one, which may just be because this is probably my favorite one when it comes to the A-sides. It's just fun to create strange drawings and strange patterns. Here it becomes a little more dry, a little more typical area majority type of thing. Basically, each strip as a single area. For the temple, the alternate side, the optional or the second side of the temple does not score you points only, but gives you bonuses every time that you put a stone, and at the end of a round the stone is visible, the player gains the corresponding advantage. And simply their advantage is represented by those icons there. In this case, for example, all of these are visible. White gains a victory point or 2 stones for that. 2 victory points, again, 1 point or 2 stones. A card from the market supply, or a point and 2 stones. Pyramids, instead of building a big pyramid, the B side allows you to build smaller pyramids. You have to build them in the usual order, but you get to choose in which pyramid you want to add your stones as they come off the boat. And when you place a stone on a certain space, you gain a number of victory points and or you gain benefits represented by those icons. These small pyramids only have 2 levels, but putting the single stone that goes on the second level gives you 4 points. The market in the B version is very similar to the previous one. You still have cards that come out of this deck that will populate the market. It's just that the other side has 4 cards all available face up. This other market has 3 cards face up and then 2 cards face down. So you can choose to purchase, to acquire any 1 card face up, or to go for this mini deck here. You look at the 2 cards and you select one. So here more choice, but with some uncertainty here. You know what you get, but that's all that you get. So in case you don't see anything interesting here, you may decide to go for this other thing here. You continue the game loading stones on your sledges, then the boats, then placing them on these boards here, assessing the points that you score at the end of each round or immediately, depending on the type of mini board that you are considering. Then you have a final round of scoring at the end of the game, considering the things that score only at the end of the game, such as the burial chamber. Also, that is when you score cards, such as the statues, for example. There are other cards that score at the end of the game, the green ones, for example, this one. You earn a point for 3 stones in the obelisk, your own plus others. So just number of stones in general, number of stones in the temple, this sort of thing. Once you have taken into account all the victory points that you get from all possible scoring sources, the player with the highest total is the winner of the game. Imhotep, a game that really is intensely Euro. I mean, this game is such a Euro, it is still eating a baguette. That's how much of a Euro it is. It is the quintessential embodiment of Euro game with beautiful and yet very simple, sober, minimalistic components, with straightforward mechanics, with very little luck involved, pretty much only in the cards that come out, and that is all about planning. It's all about reading the opponent. It's all about making decisions in an environment which is crowded with other people that are making decisions and affecting what's available, and it's about balancing short-term objectives with long-term objectives, from putting those darn cubes on the boat that you think will go to the destination, will be profitable to you, to figuring out a way 3 turns from now to have a certain configurations of blocks in a certain area. The balance between the short and the long terms objectives is really remarkable. It works perfectly. And it is really what a Eurogame should be, with the simple mechanics, the simple rules. It's like 2 pages of rules with some extra rules when it comes to learning, understanding the specific locations. But the core engine is so insanely simple. Get new blocks, send those blocks, get new blocks, place those blocks, send those blocks, or play a card. That's pretty much it. And yet so much depth that emerges from it. A 3-dimensional game. A game whose complexity and absolutely sense of incredible richness is not easy to gauge from mechanics that are so simple. And yet you have so many interesting decisions that come from, of course, whether or not you're going to place blocks on a certain boat, and are you going to put them towards the back, maybe not entirely in the back, depending on what you think other players are doing. What do you think players are gonna do in the next turn? In their turn is supremely important. It's not like I do my own little thing, you do your own little thing. Let's see who has optimized our resources in the most efficient way. Boring. It really is about reading your opponent, because I may have created a great combination on that ship. I think I'm gonna do really well when I send it to that destination. Only you're gonna send it somewhere else, because you do not have to have blocks on a ship to send it somewhere. And to me, this is the one mechanic that gives the game its personality. It's almost like, the point of gravity around which everything revolves. You're not entirely sure. You cannot be entirely sure of where your things are going to go. You cannot count on being able to send them where you want. And that is something you have to take into account. Maybe you will place a configuration of cubes on various boats, on multiple boats, which is not ideal, but it's kind of similar on all of them, and it's good enough. So no matter how much your opponents they want to mess with you, the boats that they are sending more or less all look the same, and so wherever they send them is going to be more or less the same. One at least will go in the place where you want it to go, and that configuration of cubes will go where you want it to go. Or you're gonna try to keep a low profile. You're gonna create a certain boat that is not, let's call it, overpowerful, does not obviously score too much in a certain area. So the opponents may say, well, if I send it there, I'm gonna damage him, but maybe I can do something else for myself. So they overlook you, and you get a chance later to send your things. This idea, you plan and you do not know if you'll be able to execute, is to me the key element of this design. It's what makes it so fresh, what makes it so interactive, so deep, while still remaining such a simple, intuitive game at its core. Also, you have great replay value, different configurations of things, even if you're playing against those annoying people that create their own mental algorithm. At least they will have to do some extra work, because they will have to plan around all possible configurations of all 4 tiles. And yet, even then, in that case, if you want a little more luck, because you really have some human computer that you're playing against, and luck in some cases is annoying, in some other cases is useful, because it allows you to create some unpredictable events when the game may otherwise be too dry, then you can choose the configuration of the market that brings some extra unpredictable elements to the design. But as is, the design to me is absolutely astounding. I found the back and the front and the back of the tiles to be in most cases equally interesting. They just present different challenges, and the fact that you can mix and match and to customize the game in any way you want. It's truly remarkable. You do not have that very often in Euro games that are so tight. The mechanics are tight. I mean, in a sense, when you play it with the 4 tiles as they are, with the front side up as it is recommended, the first time I played it, I barely could believe that there were ways of changing the game, or playing it differently, because it just felt so tight. It just felt like it was such a full experience in its own that I could not imagine changing something without the entire thing falling apart. And guess what? It works. You can change 1, 2, or all of the tiles, change them around, flip them to either side, and yet the game still works. It presents different levels of challenge. It presents different mental processes that you have to go through, but the challenge in all cases remains interesting, remains rewarding, very satisfying. It's a great game. Again, I hope it wins everything that it can, and then some, because I found Imhotep to be an absolutely instant classic game. To me, this is the game that 10 years from now I will show to people, to give them a sense of what a good Euro game is. A game that I can teach in 5-10 minutes, we can play in half an hour, and we can have a very deep, very immersive experience with a lot of strategy, a lot of nice, fascinating thinking going on, a lot of interaction, and all of this on the game that simply looks beautiful because of the elements taken singularly, taken individually, and also because of what the elements build as the game progresses. I can't think of a single negative thing to say about Imhotep. Absolutely an astounding game, phenomenal game, one of the best Euro games I played in a long time, if not one of the best Euro games that I played ever.